Okay, once again, asking people to give me a check on how the audio sounds, and I'll get us ready for tonight's stream. Sorry for the delay. There was just a bunch of stuff came up yesterday, so I couldn't do it when I wanted to. And as much as I enjoyed the last one, because I just, the last 10-20 minutes of part 4 was just me geeking out over one particular story, here, Marvel Star Wars gets pretty damn interesting. Oh, by the way, I don't think I mentioned it when I talked about Third Law, but Larry Hama, the writer who did that brilliant mind game plot between Leia and Vader, I salute you, sir, wherever you are. Okay, the audio is good. Let me just get the game up and we will begin. So this one's a little interesting. We come to the last of the this period of one-offs, and then we get a couple of two-parters for this round. And then we get into, I guess, not really so much an overarching story, but there is several stories connected by a subplot that gets real relevant by the end. And it's going to get pretty interesting, too, especially with its implications for a lot of Star Wars media that came out later in, like, late 90s, early 2000s. And so, we start with issue number 49, and hilariously in hindsight, it is entitled The Last Jedi by Mike W. Barr as the writer, and we have Walt Simonson and Tom Palmer doing art duty. And I'll pause for just a moment to let you guys recover from any unpleasant flashbacks you may have to a certain movie from 2017. Okay, let's get this stream going properly, and we will begin my one-sided talking about Marvel Star Wars. So, The Last Jedi, and I cannot say that without resisting the urge to crack up. So once again, link in the description to the website where you can read the comic online if you wish to follow along. Yeah, this one. And we are, again, starting issue 49. And so we, yes. Okay. Basically, Leia and Luke are off on a kind of recruitment mission. They want to get a planet to sign on to the Rebel Alliance. And their best shot is to possibly find this lost prince of the royal house who has been living in a kind of self-imposed, well, partially self-imposed, at least exile, on this dinky little out-of-the-way planet. The name, let me get the name quick. Well, can't find it quickly, and it's not important enough to matter. So it's Luke and Leia and the droids, and the guy they're looking for is this Prince Denid. Yeah, Prince Denid of Velmor. They managed to find him very quickly after one of the local wildlife tries to attack them. But it's not just Denid they find there. Also, this old alien called Jedida, whose whose greatest dream was to one day become a Jedi, but he felt that his service to the royal family of Velmor mattered more than his personal desires, so he refused to undergo training despite having some form of force sensitivity. Alas, when Denid was driven off of his planet in a coup helmed by his younger brother, who was pro-Empire, he ended up losing both of his parents. Jedida, or, he's sometimes called Jedi for short, which is kind of weird and confusing. But anyway, he was the only other person to survive, although in the process, the poor alien suffered a brain injury that caused him to basically it did a lot of damage to his mind so that he really doesn't think straight anymore. The only coherent thought in his brain is his old dream of being a Jedi. And so he spends the entire chapter just mumbling to himself about being a Jedi and defending the weak, all that stuff. An expanded universe book called The Last Jedi. Which series is that from? Do you mind, can you look that up? Because that's, again, one of those weird coincidences. Or, well, it's also the fact that it seems that no matter what decade you are, there seems to be a certain lack of creativity at Lucasfilm when it comes to naming things. I mean, literally, there's the Jedi Academy book trilogy, then there's Jedi Academy the video game, and then, there's for whatever reason, they just, when Dieter did the sort of novellas, companions to the initial Jedi Knight books, he just names one of them Jedi Knight. Which is, just like the name of the second game, and it's like, come on, Lucasfilm. What is it with you and names? Oops. So anyway, the big takeaway from Jedida's condition is that Luke is kind of annoyed by this because, given that he's, especially ever since he learned that his father was a Jedi, this is post Empire Strikes Back, but the cause of the Jedi still matters to him. And, he's more than a little offended that this mentally damaged guy is also, claiming to be a Jedi Knight of sorts. Even though, again, he's just not quite with it. It's not really his fault. So, Luke still has a bit of maturing left to do, in spite of everything. So, anyway, they make it to Denid's planet without incident. And in fact, they arrive right at the moment where his younger brother, let me quickly look up his name, at Prince Anod. And, Denid is, he's written in that sort of conventionally handsome 70s, Silver Age aesthetic, whereas Anod kind of reminds me of a slightly less exaggerated Ichabod Crane from the old Disney movie. He's tall and gangling, and he has this prominent nose. The Coruscant Knights series, damn, and did not know that it would be from that one, and I'm looking forward to covering that series one day. Because, it's apparently Star Wars with noir thrown in. And, I'm not a noir expert, but that still sounds like a winning combination in my eyes. Of course, we'll find out. Quickly check something. So anyway, the way that they're selling this is that... Oh, right, the one other person to escape from Velmor along with Denid and Jedida was Denid's fiancée. Unfortunately, she died shortly after their arrival on the planet and was buried there. So the scam, and really it is a scam, is to basically have Leia play the part of being Denid's fiancée to better sort of sell his legitimacy as a claimant to the throne, while Luke assumes the guise of the mercenary captain who just discovered them and has sort of brought the prince back for a hefty reward. And Luke wears this fairly comical old disguise. I don't know how it must have looked in the early 80s, but it does look kind of silly. He even has a fake mustache and everything. So anyway, the other players in this little scheme up, because obviously they expect opposition to Denid reclaiming his throne and bringing Velmor onto the side of the rebellion, besides his younger brother, are the Regent, and blast it, I gotta look up his name. Zelor, pretty standard sci-fi name, and an Imperial Army officer, or Captain Traal, Navy officer then, yeah. And so obviously, pretty much all three of these people I've just mentioned, the Prince, the Regent, and the Imperial, are very much invested in, killing Denid before he can properly claim his rightful throne as the elder son. Because, they put the guy through a test that proves that, yes, he is who he says he is. The there's the bit of a running subplot where, you know, Luke, even again, this is before Return of the Jedi, so he doesn't know Leia is his sister, and unfortunately, because, you know, she has to play the role of Denid's fiance, he kind of gets jealous. Because, again, he may have grown up quite a bit since Bespin, but Luke still has a lot of learning to do before he becomes sort of the Paragon Jedi Knight that he is by the end of the third movie. And so it's pretty standard. It's, you know, thwart an assassination attempt. And, you know, it's done during a royal hunt, because of course it is. And, you know, the story itself is okay, but there are a lot of moments that I kind of dislike on the basis that they're not done particularly well, and they're sort of old hat. I don't believe in bad tropes, I only believe in badly used ones, but with some tropes, because when they're used so often and they become so familiar, you need to do them really well, otherwise you're just going to elicit a bunch of eye rolls from whatever your audience is. And they sort of have this cliche moment where Luke is going to warn Leia and Denid because Captain Trawl has attempted to seduce him to try and get him on their side to kill Denid in exchange for, you know, a higher pay, because she thinks Luke is a mercenary. And mercs can always be bought. So, you know, he's climbing down to, to the balcony, because there's always a balcony, to where Leia is staying with Denid under her cover as his fiance. And, you know, he overhears Denid pronounce that he really does love Leia and would like her to stay. And, you know, the classic scene of the silhouette through the curtains as they embrace. And so, of course, Luke gets jealous, and oof. It's one of those things that's really awkward, particularly in a post Return of the Jedi, and the fact that this is like a very old, hammy trope, and it's not like done in any particularly good or special way. It's just done, and so it doesn't really have anything else to recommend to it. But anyway, they try to assassinate Denid during the hunt, of course, and of course they fail, if only because everybody is scheming against everybody else. Like, the bad guys are not a united front here. Obviously, Anod wants the throne, and he's sort of the most incompetent of the trio. Whereas Zelor kind of wants, because, you know, he's been regent for all this time, and, you know, he doesn't want to give up his power. He's, you know, the typical power-hungry vizier sort of thing, you know. And Trawl, meanwhile, wants to eliminate both of them so that she can just have the Empire take over directly. You know, why go through these, you know, puppet rulers and such? And so, partly thanks to the intervention of Luke, and partly because they try to work against each other, all three of the antagonists end up dying. Although at one point, Luke is nearly dead to rights by the bad guys, and in desperation he sends out a mental cry for help, and Jedida, the crazy alien that's been with Denid this whole time and thinks he's a Jedi, actually responds, and he saves Luke at the cost of his own life. And so finally this causes Luke to finally, you know, stop disliking the old alien, and sort of making him go, he sacrificed himself for me and I was such a jerk, you know, that old chestnut. But, you know, that's that. Denid has no longer any rivals to the throne. And, you know, he asks Leia to stay, but Leia, her heart belongs, one, to Han, and two, to the rebellion. So, being third in line doesn't give Denid much chance. Of course, Luke hasn't yet fully realized that he's also third in line, and, you know, there's the sibling thing. It's really both funny and cringy, how this comic plays with the relationship between Luke and Leia prior to 1983. But, you know, the chapter does end on a somewhat touching note. You know, if the story had been a better one overall and, you know, not as bland as it is, I might have been more invested in it. But, you know, they give Jedida a send-off, a space burial, and sort of Luke spins him a brief eulogy. And, you know, salutes with his lightsaber, praising him as a true Jedi. And, you know, again, the Last Jedi from the old Marvel run, it's pretty bland, nothing too exceptional, nothing done especially noteworthy, but, you know, I think I can speak sorry, for the entire fandom here when I say I would take this Last Jedi over Rian Johnson's Last Jedi in a heartbeat. And, you know, if the Coruscant Nights trilogy turns out to be as good as I hope, you know, I'll take that over both of them. Okay, so now we move on to issue 50, and apparently because this was issue number 50 of a long-running series, they decided to do something a little special for this one and make it a double length. So it's kind of like a 2-for-1 deal. And it's basic... and this one, for lack of any better term, I call it the Crimson Forever plot line. Because even though, it's technically only one issue, but, you know, the length, it's pretty much 2. It's 2 in all the ways that matter. So, it starts with Lando and Chewie continuing the search for Han. Only they get called off their mission at the last minute, just when they're about to catch a guy that might have a lead on Boba Fett and Han. You know, though they don't say exactly how long this has been going on, but given the time frame, you would think that at this point they must have assumed that Boba Fett's got to have gotten Han to Tatooine by now, and, you know, the slimy clutches of Jabba. So you'd think that by now they would start, you know, planning in that direction. But anyway, they're called back to the rebels have had, you know, by this point it's post-Empire, so they've abandoned Hoth. So it's back to temporary bases until they can find a new permanent one. This time it's on a lava planet, so... And in fact, Lando even points out that this is like pretty much the exact opposite of Hoth. And it turns out Luke is dying from a terrible illness. They call it the Crimson Forever because apparently when it kills you, it turns your eyes and your skin go blood red, and your eyes just bulge and they stare, as if you are staring into forever. Not the kind of a tacky name, but hey, as space plagues go, it's not terrible. So Leia sort of fills in Lando and Chewie that Luke and some rebels found a derelict Star Destroyer, boarded it. Unfortunately, then they found the bodies, and by then it was kind of too late. They'd been exposed to it. And pretty much all the others have died except for Luke, possibly because his connection to the Force is strong enough to keep him alive this long. But at this point, his eyes have turned red, and unless Lando and Chewie can help our heroes find a cure, Luke is done for. Their only clue is that when they were aboard the Star Destroyer, Luke and the unfortunate rebels found this weird crimson gem. And after analysis, despite how unlikely it is, it seems that this was the major vector of the disease. And the reason why Leia called them back specifically is because the Crimson Jewel reminded her of something that Han mentioned briefly to her. Chewie is angry at this, of course, because as 3PO translates it, Han had promised Chewie to never mention the Crimson Gem, but unfortunately, because this might be the only clue to saving Luke, Chewbacca is forced to explain what happened. So apparently this is after the Battle of Yavin, some undisclosed time after the Battle of Yavin, where Han and Chewie are once again on the run from both Imperials and bounty hunters while they're trying to find a way to square the debt with Jabba. They manage to lose them, only to then get taken prisoner and basically shanghaied into being part of a mercenary outfit for this sort of pinkish, like hornless Deveronian looking guy named Klisk. Though he doesn't explain yet exactly what he wants them for, but he basically says that he needs to fulfill he and his followers need to fulfill their ultimate destiny, and Han, Chewie, and all these other smugglers and mercs that they've shanghaied are their best bet to achieving it. And they fly literally beyond the galaxy to a place called the Red Nebula. Supposedly it was part of the Star Wars galaxy, but then broke off from it some time ago. and sort of went spinning off into the void all on its own. Though how exactly a nebula breaks off, I don't exactly understand, but then I'm not an astrophysicist or a cosmologist, so who knows? They are, of course, pretty much all the planets in the system that they arrive in are dead, all except for one, unusually. Well, and I must qualify, one planet has life on it, and then only on a single part of it. This weird little valley with a temple in it. And Klisk tells them that there, within the temple, lies a pair of crimson jewels. If Han and his fellow reluctant operatives get the jewels back for him, Klisk promises to pay them handsomely. And so, greed is as good a motivator as any. And while several end up dying from the defenses the temple has, because it's not just an abandoned place, there are folks living there, some of them, including Han and Chewie, manage to make it inside. There they find an alien that looks just like Klisk, who along with a giant furry humanoid monster thing, is the guardian of the gems, because they're determined to keep them out of Klisk's hands, just as Klisk is so eager to get his hands on them. Luckily, it is a bit contrived here, but the main reason that that Han and Chewie are even successful is because for whatever reason, the giant furry monster takes one look at Chewie and for some reason sort of treats him like a baby, and she starts cuddling him as if he were a child. And this is actually the reason why Chewbacca made Han promise never to mention this story, because he found it humiliating. I mean, Wookiees have pride, and they are something of a warrior culture. But anyway, Han is basically able to swipe the jewels because, the big monster is just distracted with fawning over Chewie, much to the Wookiee's chagrin. He tries to make a deal with Klisk, but Klisk just takes the gems from him because he basically said, "Okay, you won't just give it over to me. Fine. All you other mercs, if he doesn't give it to me, shoot him, and then I'll pay you extra, as well as the prize for recovering the gems in the first place." And so Klisk flies off. Leaving Han and Chewie supposedly stranded, though, as it turns out, the other alien that looks like Klisk, the priest who guards the temple, does have a ship of his own. And it turns out that weird destiny that Klisk was talking about was to die. So apparently, when the Red Nebula broke off from the rest of the Star Wars galaxy, and pretty much all life died because there was a lot of meteoric bombardment of all the worlds in the system, but only the valley with the temple survived because supposedly of the crystals. And while the faction that the priest was part of figured, hey, this is a good thing, we're still alive, and there must be a purpose as to why we still live, Klisk and his faction belonged to became a kind of fatalistic death cult. And they believed that, when the Red Nebula broke off, it was their time to all die. And the fact that the red crystals kept them alive is a kind of blasphemy against fate. And so, Han and the others watch on the scopes as Klisk just steers his ship with all the other mercs on board into the local sun. And that's that. So that's the backstory over. So now... and apparently the reason that this might be of use to Luke is because the priest revealed to Han that when the gems are separated, they do kill whoever is unlucky enough to be near them. However, together, they are benevolent. The priest believes that the crystals are the two gems are living things. And they kill people because when they're apart, is because they're just... they get really negative when someone tries to separate them from each other. Pretty extreme, but then again, these aren't really... while they're alive, they're not sentient, these gemstones, so it's not entirely something you can fault them for. And so, our heroes head off to find the Red Nebula beyond the reaches of the galaxy in the hope that maybe if they can basically return this to this one crystal that was found aboard the Star Destroyer to the priest, it might save Luke. However, they find yet another derelict ship, which Leia recognizes, as a House of Tag vessel, and wouldn't you know it, it turns out that the one behind all of this was Domina Tag, the youngest of the House of Tag, who is still hell-bent on killing Luke for, albeit unintentionally, bringing about her brother's death. Only this time, apparently, when she learned about the crystal, she basically figured, oh, well, Darth Vader was my brother's enemy as much as Luke was, and so now that I know, since she basically forced the priest to tell her how the crystal does it, how the two gems do their thing, if I just separate the gems, have one fall into the hands of the Empire and one into the hands of the Rebellion, I will literally be killing two birds with one stone, destroying both of my brother's great enemies and the causes they serve, the Empire and the Rebellion. Damn. Find Orman Tag's coffin and hook up some wires to that, because if you recall from one of the earlier streams, Orman's main goal with regards to Domino was that he knew that his family had to do a lot of dirty dealings because that's just the way the galaxy was. But he had a soft spot for his little sister, and he wanted her to remain pure and innocent, which is why he ultimately had her go off to a monastery. And he did care about Domina, which is why she loved him so much that she's determined to avenge him. But like I said, now going this far, like I said, hook up a power generator to Tag's corpse, because that man must be spinning in his grave at Mach speed. Now, Domina is not entirely alone. In order to acquire the gems and from the priest and the furry guardian, which apparently is dead as far as I can tell, she's hired some bounty hunters. Bosk, the Trandoshan, IG-88, the droid bounty hunter, and is it it's Dengar. Dengar, the human who looks like he wears bandages. They all three are among the bounty hunters that feature in The Empire Strikes Back briefly in the Boba Fett intro. And in later books and comics, each of them would all get fleshed out and get their own stories. Anyway, unfortunately, the reason why that House of Tag vessel was found stranded in space is because, unfortunately, let me look that up. Sorry, folks. How exactly did this transpire? Okay, so Domina found the gem, and then, just as she and her bounty hunter escorts were leaving the Red Nebula, they were picked up by an Imperial cruiser. Unfortunately, and of course, Domina willingly surrendered the gem, because again, surrendered at least one of the gems to the Imperials. I'm assuming she concealed the other somehow, though, because, the whole point was that one would find its way into the hands of the Rebellion, one into the hands of the Empire, so that the malignant effect of the two gems being separated would kill them all. Unfortunately, there was a firefight between the Imperials and some of the bounty hunters, and as a consequence, Domina and her cohorts had to seal themselves away in an isolated part of the ship, so that they could avoid being exposed to the gem. Now, apparently, if you're in like a completely sealed suit, you are beyond the malignant influence of the gems. But you know, they didn't have any suits, Domina and the bounty hunters. And in fact, you know, Leia's unsurprisingly more than a little horrified that that Domina would go this far just for the sake of revenge, because who knows how many people, not even, you know, non-imperial as well as, you know, rebellion and like that would have died, because this plague would just keep spreading and spreading. And so they do manage to, thanks to Lando in this instance, they managed to outwit the bounty hunters long enough to escape from the Falcon, with the Falcon. And because they plan to just, you know, leave the gem there, leave Domina and the bounty hunters there, we'll send some droids to get to recover the gem because they are immune, obviously. However, and you know, they're content to leave Domina and her henchmen where they are, but because, you know, she's desperate to escape, especially before, you know, the limited air left aboard the ship runs out, she reluctantly concedes that there might be a way to use the gems to save Luke Skywalker. And so, of course, you know, although they don't trust Domina any farther than they could throw the Falcon, Leia, Lando, Chewie, and the droids bring them all back to the temporary Rebel base. Meanwhile, though, it turns out that their efforts were not entirely necessary. Though the gems turn out to be useful at saving all the others because, in fact, it turns out the rebels aren't dead. And the gems had apparently just suppressed their life signs to the point where instruments read them as dead. And the Imperials were all dead simply because, you know, they'd been there way too long. In this sort of comatose state, and they just died from, you know, lack of food and water. Luke, meanwhile, is having this sort of fever dream in his head. Literally a fever dream, I should say. It's not sort of. It is a fever dream. Where he's like fleeing through these crimson mists from a specter of Darth Vader. But then he has a vision of Obi-Wan and Yoda, and Luke realizes that he can't escape this vision of the Dark Lord, and so he just stands and lets Vader cut him down. And, you know, it's all suspenseful the way it's played up, but of course it turns out that, you know, through his connection to the Force, Luke is able to shake off the Crimson forever. As for Domina, she does go on her way because, you know, the deal was she would go be left alive and go free in exchange for saving Luke. Although in this case she didn't so much save Luke, but she did help save the other rebels, so it works. And because, you know, they used the gem they found aboard the Imperial Star Destroyer and the gem that Domina still had with her. However, as they were leaving, because, you know, Leia's not too happy with letting Domina go, given that, again, she was willing to let this supernatural illness kill everyone in the galaxy just so that she could get Luke and Vader. Lando mentions, you know, I made it mention to those bounty hunters that given all the trouble that she's caused the Empire, there might be a reward for Domina. And he says they seemed pretty enthusiastic about the idea. Interesting, and so whether or not so it's kind of in doubt if she will ever show up again. You know, I didn't read ahead because I don't want to spoil myself here, but I did look this up on Wikipedia, and apparently all these guys from the House of Tag would later be brought into the current Disney Marvel Star Wars comic. Though somehow I have a hard time believing that these will be in any way decent portrayals of the characters. But who knows? I can always hope, because, you know, Star Wars is all about hope, and, you know, I'd be a pretty poor fan. But then again, you know, it's current year Disney Marvel, so who knows? Who knows? I try not to let myself be black-pilled in terms of the things I love. Okay, so now we move on to the first of a couple of two-parters. The rebels are basically once again are as ever in a tight spot because they've been on the run ever since they've had to leave Hoth behind, and apparently the Empire is planning something especially nasty. Let's see. Luke and Leia managed to return from their respective missions. Luke nearly gets shot by an AT-ST. So, a chicken leg walker. And Lando and Chewie are once again recalled from chasing down a lead on Han. Again, at this point, it does feel like so much time has passed. I really do wonder why they wouldn't already be, planning the Tatooine thing. Domina took Orman's role as head of the family in the reboot. Well, this is the Force's female crowd. I'm not surprised. But who knows? Who knows? I'm not going to judge too much until I see for myself. Again, I try to avoid being black-pilled. So, of course, Luke's escape from the Empire does not amuse Vader because he's still hell-bent on getting him. And this time, instead of just force-choking the Imperial officer that failed to get him, Vader literally just does something kind of darker, really. He mind tricks him into walking out the airlock. And literally, another bridge officer says, Lord Vader, our instruments indicate that an exterior airlock has just opened and closed of its own volition. And Vader just says, oh, how curious. A faulty mechanism, no doubt. So anyway, we have General Riken, from the guy who was in charge of the rebels on Hoth, explain to everybody what's going on. And wouldn't you know it, it's another super weapon. Though not the Death Star this time. This one, basically a similar idea. It's basically a giant super laser, only this time it's hooked up to like an actual ship instead of a space station. And they're calling it the Tarkin in honor of the Death Star's creator. And so basically the idea is, okay, this thing is basically just fresh out of the dry dock. There's still a chance that we can get some people on board to infiltrate and destroy it from the inside. And of course, who else do they send but Luke and Leia? Though frankly, the only part that I really do question is, why Chewbacca? I mean, I know that this is before they've established the Empire as xenophobic, and the idea of Wookiees being regularly enslaved by the Empire. But it's like a Wookiee kind of stands out, and the idea of an infiltration mission is you're trying to be inconspicuous. But at any rate, they do manage to sneak their way on board the Tarkins somehow. And I admit, the Tarkin's design is kind of cool in that early '80s way. It looks like it looks like the back half of a Star Destroyer, and then the front half just got chopped off, and the Death Star super laser was stuck into its place. Nice. Not a bad design. Not a bad design. And so, of course, it's Luke, Leia, Chewie, and the droids. However, it turns out that Vader, this is all a trap by Vader, because again, he's trying to get Luke, and he figures, well, who else would the rebels send on a mission of such importance? And so he figures, well, this time Skywalker is mine. Let's see. What was the date of issue 51? Let me just quickly look that up. issue 51, because we're on issue 51, and that was... Oh, we're in June of 1981, so we're about a year or so after The Empire Strikes Back, and 2 years shy of Return of the Jedi. I guess, like, my only issue is the fact that by this point, you know, given the success of Empire, it was pretty clear that there was going to be a final concluding film. So it's like, you know, and obviously there's not going to be a big like the whole thing with Luke and Vader. They must have known it wasn't going to end until that movie came out. So it's like, kind of, why bother with this kind of suspense? Then again, it is established pretty clear from Empire that Vader is obsessed with finding Luke. So so in that sense, it does make sense. But like, from a meta, I guess it's just from the meta perspective where it just feels like, why bother teasing with this? We know this. You know that it's only going to end once the movie comes out. And of course, you know, it goes about as well as you expect. The Luke and Leia and Chewie and the droids do, you know, eventually manage to successfully sabotage the Tarkin. In fact, Leia actually does most of the actual saboteuring because everybody else is just constantly distracted by being hunted down by stormtroopers and running for their lives. And so Leia fiddles with the super laser of the Tarkin so that it blows itself up when it tries to fire. The only thing that's actually interesting about 51 and 52, because this is a two-part arc, is that there's actually this little conspiracy among some Imperials to try and kill Vader because they are just so sick and tired of him, you know, killing off their officers every time, you know, one of them makes a mistake or fails him. Because, you know, Vader has always, apart from maybe Ozzel, because we don't know if he's failed him before, but, like, you know, Vader says, "You failed me for the last time," famously. So it kind of assumes that this isn't the first mistake Ozzel has made. But, you know, Vader has a very, very limited number of strikes he's willing to give his subordinates before he kills them. And so it's, you know, it's a bunch of officers who figure, well, we could be next. And so at one point they actually try to kill him by, they find, like, Vader in front of an airlock, and one of them just, like, activates it to hopefully suck the Dark Lord into space. But of course, Vader is far too powerful, and he manages to use the Force to just hold himself in the doorway enough that he can pull himself clear and blow and, like, close the doors behind him. And, you know, the only good thing about, you know, I guess in that sense, the officers must be grateful that Leia blows up the Tarkin with her sabotage, because, you know, it was that or die at Vader's hands. So they were dead either way. But, you know, it's essentially an abridged version of the escape from the Death Star kind of thing. Nothing particularly exceptional or spectacular, though I will say the artwork is definitely growing on me. I'm kind of ambivalent to Silver Age art style, but I mean, hey, it's well done, and I actually think at points it looks pretty damn good. Let me see. Infantino does most of the art most of the time, but you do get a couple of other guys. There's like this Walter Simonson, who was the penciler. Or for this one. And like, I'm speaking of, like, you know, they tried to push Vader out of an airlock. Another time where the officers conspiring against Vader try to kill him is that just as the rebels are escaping, Vader tries to pursue in his special TIE fighter. I believe it's called the TIE Special. I'm not too well versed in ship names, and, you know, ship model names, I should say. And basically, the Imperials are like, okay, we'll just fire, and if we happen to kill Vader along with the rebels, so much the better. But of course, you know, they fail, and well, actually, yeah, that's the moment where Leia's sabotage comes into play. and the Tarkin blows itself up. But of course, Vader's going to survive. He survived the Death Star. He's going to survive the Tarkin's demise. I mean, it's in the Tarkin arc, for lack of any better term. This little two-parter. It's fun, but it's just nothing particularly exceptional or noteworthy that hasn't, at this point, even in early in Star Wars, hasn't already been done. Like I said, it's basically a retread of the Death Star. The next another two-parter, I just call this the John Carter arc, because literally this series is just clearly an homage by writer. Oh, it's Chris Claremont, the aunt, doing the writer, and Infantino and Simonson are sort of doing double duty as art. But yeah, clearly I think Claremont is a fan of John Carter of Mars. The original, but specifically the original pulps by Edgar Rice Burroughs. And so literally the whole bit with this story is literally to just have a Star Wars story take place on Barsoom, which is what they call Mars in the John Carter series. Yes. Leia's on a mission for the rebellion, as, typical, because, she's just not the kind of girl to just stand by and let others do all the work of fighting the good fight. Right? And her ship gets shot down, and she lands... what's the name of this planet? In fact, she's actually reminiscing about Alderaan, and right at the moment her ship gets shot down. What is this planet called? Shiva 4, that's it. I think it's, Shiva or Shiva 4. And basically, literally, you can tell it's anyone who's familiar with the old pulps. This is clearly a John Carter of Mars homage, because the inhabitants of Shiva 4 are humanoids, and they basically dress in that classic Burroughsian, for lack of a better term, way. They wear loincloth, space loincloths and chest harnesses, and not much else. And they even have the humans, or at least the ones that look really human, even have red skin. So clearly they're meant to be the red men of Barsoom. There's a couple of alien characters on that world who are meant to stand in, obviously, for the green Martians, only they don't have 4 arms and they are orange. The really interesting thing about this story is that it's told entirely from the perspective of one of the leaders on Shiva 4, Aaron Peacebringer. And literally, instead of where the narration that these chapters have is usually in the omnipotent third-person perspective, for this two-parter, all the narration is from Aaron's perspective, which is an interesting change. And I can't. This doesn't sound like this might be an editorial thing, but this sounds more like a Chris Claremont thing. And it's and you can really tell that Claremont is a big fan of Burroughs' work, because Aaron's narration is in that very classic, very romantic and melodramatic style. The Silver Age, the omnipotent narrator thing, and for most of these comics, was already pretty melodramatic, because that was a big thing in the Silver Age. But this is especially very, for lack of a better word, it's this very, very pulpy style of writing. And so it's basically from him that we get up to speed on what the situation is on Shiva 4. Ooh, quite a few comments this time. From William Burgle, you are just a font of knowledge, my friend. Are you sure that you shouldn't be hosting this stream? The John Carter parallels may be more complicated. The letters column said it was inspired by them, but according to an article I read, Simonson claimed in the book Modern Masters Walter Simonson. Follow-up, that Infantino drew the issue of Marvel's John Carter comic. Oh! which got canceled before it could be used since Marvel had already paid for it. Simonson, Palmer, and Claremont had to turn it into a Star Wars story, though I heard this secondhand, so I can't confirm if Simonson said that or not. Oh, that's interesting. Again, I'm sort of having to wonder who the real host should be. You seem to know a lot more about this stuff than I do. But yeah, so Leia crash lands on Shiva 4. She's harassed by some hostile locals, because the thing is, Aaron Peacebringer is not just a clever name. He's literally dedicated his life to uniting the warring factions of Shiva together into a single people. The exact fact. The two big ones are. Yes, the 12 tribes led by this guy called Keral Longknife, and the Kalian Confederacy, which Aaron himself leads. And basically, the two men became blood brothers, despite being the leaders of opposing factions, and through this friendship, they have been able to forge a very tenuous peace. It's been barely a year since, these two factions have stopped trying to kill each other. There. And so, apparently, while Aaron, Keral, and two others, what are their names? Blasted. Havaro and Delois, Delois. Who is the latter of whom is the captain of the guard, basically. And so these four are out in sort of the wilds of their world, because there are a few outcast groups that reject the peace and unity and are constantly causing trouble. And they find Leia being pursued by some of these guys and, intervene. And the thing is, Aaron is married. He has a wife. I think her name is Alessandra. It's spelled like with a Y rather than a, so I can't be certain, but I'm guessing Alessandra. And they even have children, though the children are never seen. But he is almost immediately smitten with the Princess of Alderaan. And part of the his inner monologue, that narration, is basically him wrestling with his feeling like he's he doesn't do anything with Leia, but he does sort of wrestling with his seeming lack of fidelity. Though funnily enough, Alessandra notices very quickly that her husband seems to have the hots for the strange off-worlder with the unusually pale complexion. But she seems very confident that, that Aaron loves her above all else and that ultimately he'll come back to her. So, I hope he appreciates what a lucky man he is in this regard, Mr. Aaron Peacebringer. And so basically, eventually, because, Leia's ship was shot down, at this point, no one knows where she is. The hope she has is that the rebels home in on the ship's distress beacon before it was wiped out. So it's a faint chance at a rescue. And basically, she does eventually settle into life on Shiva, because everybody is very nice to her. And at one point during a party, where it seems like Deloy, the guard captain, is flirting with her, she ends up running off. And at first, you think it's because maybe Deloy did something, but he didn't. Aaron finds her, and Leia basically confesses that ever since Alderaan was destroyed, she's been keeping herself under this rigid control. She has not really allowed herself to really contemplate anything other than the struggle, the rebellion against the Empire. And in a way, although she intellectually knows that Alderaan is gone, that her father is dead, that most of the people she grew up with are dead, it seems to have, sorry, never really sunk in for her until now. And so she sort of breaks down in his arms, weeping. And I really do like this. So far, it's one of the better story arcs because it really does do a great job of humanizing Leia. Because like even in the films in general, apart from like her relationship with Han, she was always sort of the one focused entirely on the cause. And in a way, it's because it's her. So she's like, it's like she's overcoming the trauma of losing her world by throwing herself into the cause of the rebellion. But she's not a woman made out of ice, and so eventually there must be a crack in that otherwise invincible armor of resolution. Of course, Aaron is not able to comfort Leia for very long because they are both captured suddenly by some Imperials led by this weird big alien guy called Scar, because like there's an apostrophe, so typical weird sounding sci-fi alien name. And it turns out that Delois is, at least the guard captain, is working with the Empire for no other reason than that he figures, well, we live on a primitive world where we still use like planes and guns and like muskets and swords. The Empire has all of this weaponry. I'd rather side with the winner than the loser. Of course, there's the big fight. Leia and Aaron manage to beat off the bad guys for a while. But of course, it's pretty desperate. It's only 2 of them against however many. But they're resolved to sell their lives dearly. But then, at the last minute, Luke arrives. Because by now, while Aaron and Leia were held prisoner, the rebels have managed to find have headed for Shiva. Luke, Chewie, and Lando were able to successfully make contact with Aaron's people, and they sort of joined forces to save him and Leia from the bad guys. So again, especially if this was originally basically based on stuff for a Marvel John Carter comic. Clearly, this whole point of this 2-parter is just to showcase that classic, sci-fi. This is almost like the sci-fi equivalent of sword and sorcery. And it really is. There's not much else to it. Of course, Leia will not. Of course, Leia is not going to stay, although she is tempted because it was a nice reprieve from having to think about the rebellion to just be a person, a normal person. But in the end, the cause still matters more to her than that, more than her own happiness or peace of mind. And like I said, I really do like how they handle this. It's the way that they sort of humanize Leia in this way. And because the people who do the comics these days, they wouldn't have Leia be emotionally vulnerable in this way at all. Never. Let me just move on to the next one. But yeah, it's a fun John Carter tribute. And I'm a big fan of Edgar Rice Burroughs' sci-fi. Oh, sorry. It's the reason that I keep putting it up in both my Patreon and Subscribestar polls for lore. But alas, no one has ever voted on it. Let's see now. Yeah. Okay, the next arc. Ah, yes. Because now we're sort of into the thing that's kind of like a long-running arc, but kind of isn't. It is a sort of a bunch of separate adventures, but there is sort of but they are more connected to one another than all the previous storylines. And we sort. So anyway, once again, we have the rebels trying to find another permanent base. And they finally find this densely forested planet called, oh, darn it. Is it Arba or Arbra? Let me quickly confirm. Yes, it is Arbra. There we go. And like, it seems to have everything they need. The forest canopy is so dense that it will make it difficult for Imperial scanners to find them. And it's pretty out of the way, obviously. Sorry. It even has the sort of a non-essential but added bonus of some cute little furry alien creatures that they call hoojibs. Yes, because, again, it's got to have a weird alien name. They basically look like... How to describe it? It looks kind of like a rabbit with big bug eyes and a weird single curly antenna in the middle of their heads. Unfortunately, it turns out the hoojibs aren't just cute, they're trouble, because it turns out these creatures eat energy, absorb energy directly. And this means that one night they end up basically not chewing through, but basically consuming all of the energy in all of the electronics and other technological devices the rebels have with them. It also turns out the hoojibs are sapient and they communicate telepathically. It does kind of beg the question why they didn't try to contact the rebels initially when they first arrived and, explain the situation. Now, normally, it seems the hoojibs would not have had to resort to feeding on the rebels' equipment. And because their home is this big cave full of these just constantly energy-emitting crystal rods. And, the hoojibs don't have to eat. They literally just siphon off energy from the crystals and sustain themselves that way. Unfortunately, they get chased out of their home. This is in the past. They've been chased away from their home by this giant flying green thing. It's just really weird looking. No, not really. Don't really have any good way to describe it. And basically, the rebels come up with a plan. Help them come up with a plan to drive them out, because the hoojibs just eat energy and they are telepathic. They don't exactly have the means to take on this big monster. And especially since the hoojibs ate all the rebels' power, they're literally reduced to whatever like primitive spears and other weapons they can just make from nearby materials. Still, in the end, mostly thanks to Chewie, because, Wookiees are really strong, they're able to slay the monster. There's very nearly a breakdown of good relations, because the rebels realize that, hey, these crystals produce all this heat, and light, and, they produce endless energy. This could be the cave that the hoojibs lived in would make a great place for a permanent base. Of course, the hoojibs object, because, this was their place first. And, it almost comes to blows. But, of course, Leia is very much a principled lady, and, we're not going to take these people's home from them. And the rebels are about to leave when the leader of the hoojibs, I think it's Plisk, basically says, look, we do owe you one, so we could have you stay as our permanent guests, essentially. We'll share the cave. And so, at last, the rebels have finally found a permanent place to call home for the time being. So, it's a pretty happy ending all around. However, because again, these stuff is all directly connected, while the story ends with Lando going back to Cloud City, because earlier in this particular chapter, we are on chapter 55 by now, apparently he's feeling a little guilty about the fact that he wasn't able to keep Cloud City from falling into the hands of the Empire. And so Lando figures, I want to go back and see if there's anything that I can do. Maybe, help the people that I once led as administrator of Cloud City. But he arrives to find it deserted, and then we, transition into Chapter 56. And as Lando is wandering around on Cloud City, because apparently what's weird is it's deserted. There's nobody there. And he's wandering around trying to puzzle out what's going on when he stumbles onto Lobot. You all remember Lobot from Empire Strikes Back. He's the bald guy with the weird implant in the back of his head that looks like earphones, but it's not. Wraps around the back of his head. Anyway, Lobot seems to have gone crazy because he attacks Lando. Oh, at the same time, though, the Empire, some Imperials show up, and eventually, hold on, let me make sure I'm getting this right. Yes, they're basically here because apparently there are some bombs on Cloud City that they need to sabotage. Though by whom and what for, we don't yet know. Unfortunately, there's this kind of funny bit where when they find the bombs initially, it turns out that there's basically this droid that's basically the guy who's in charge of setting the bombs off. But he's like, hey guys, look, I don't want to terminate my existence, so I'll actually help you disarm it. Only it turns out that it was literally just a trick, and the bomb blows up and it kills all of the Imperials except for this one officer. Darn it, I can never remember any of the names, people or place names. Names in this comic. Captain Treese, that's his name. And basically, with just him all by himself, and with Lobot, basically it seems seeing everyone as a threat to Cloud City that he has to destroy, him and Lando form a very reluctant alliance of sorts. Meanwhile, back at the new Rebel base on Arbra, things are going smoothly. The base is being set up. Luke's about to go out on another mission, and it is here where we are introduced to Lieutenant Shira Bree. It's spelled B-R-E-I. It's Bree or Bray, and I've never been able to settle on which is accurate. I settled for Bree. And it's pretty clear at this point that even though she's newly introduced, there's a bit of a connection with her and Luke, and for some reason Leia's not all that pleased by it. Though again, it is kind of weird, and they do address this later on, but it is kind of weird. Because, by this point it's clear that, the only man for her is Han Solo. And she does in fact reiterate that point. She's kind of confused as to why there's a part of her that just doesn't like Luke going off with Shira. But anyway, they do. Ooh. And, let me check something. Yes, it's because they haven't heard from Lando since he went to Cloud City in a while. And so basically Luke's taking Shira with him as backup so he can basically check in and see if Lando's okay and maybe needs help. So at any rate, Lando and Treese, Captain Treese, God, these names are just so forgettable. For some reason, they managed to subdue Lobot long enough to basically repair the damage to his cyborg circuits, which is basically the reason why he was going nuts on everything. And they use Lobot to disarm the bombs because, get this, apparently in Star Wars, cyborgs with cranial implants have magical powers. I kid you not. Apparently, by having this thing stuck in his brain, Lobot can manipulate stuff that's close by, or at least mechanical stuff that's close by, with just his mind. it's one of those things where it's just, I don't know why, but it just comes off as really silly to me. And again, this is a universe with sci-fi wizards in it, so I know that it's pretty rich of me to say that. But anyway, Lobot disarms the bombs. Of course, at this point, Treese basically figures, well, Calrissian, you've now just outlived your usefulness to me. And he literally kicks Lando over the edge to fall down through the clouds of Bespin. Now, apparently, again, because the lore of the Star Wars universe is still so very vague and nebulous at this point, they haven't yet established that Bespin is basically a gas giant. And as in, you know, covered in gas that no human can breathe and has insane gravity and a core that's made of liquid metal. Because when Lando, first Lobot jumps off after Lando and saves him with a jetpack. It can't take them back up to the city, but it basically slows their fall enough that they don't go splat. It turns out that the surface of Bespin is basically a swamp. And there they find the Ugnaughts, those little pig-faced aliens from Empire Strikes Back. You know, they were the ones that were going to feed 3PO's parts into the smelter before Chewbacca was able to save them. And it turns out that the Ugnaughts were the ones who set the bombs on Cloud City, because after the Empire took over, they basically, you know, the Empire doesn't exactly have a great track record when it comes to treating its workers, even the ones that aren't slaves. And so basically the Ugnaughts basically decided to pull one hell of a middle finger by rigging Cloud City to blow up. And that was the reason why there was no one there, because Treese had everybody evacuate Cloud City so that he and his men could later come back with the equipment to try and disarm the bombs. Now the Ugnaughts, as it turns out, remember Lando. And they figure, well, we're not exactly big fans of humans these days, but you did treat us well when you were the boss. So fine, we're willing to help you take back Cloud City from the Imperials. Oh dear. Oh no, it's just for one reason. Okay. And so they do, you know, nothing particularly spectacular. How exactly do Luke and Shira come in? Sorry, guys. Okay, so yeah, the two starfighters arrive. They help Lando, and basically Luke basically tricks the Imperials into abandoning Cloud City. He basically overloads some circuits to make it look like all the other detonators have activated and all the other bombs are going off. And at first it looks like Cloud City starts listing around crazily, and it looks like it's going to sink back into the clouds because, you know, it's suffered so much damage. But it turns out it was all a ruse, and in fact he even had Lando and Shira buying it for a moment. And there's this sort of bit where after he explains it, and Shira looks at Lando and says, "You want to hit him?" And Lando said, as ladies first. Yeah, it's a fun little story. Next up, this is basically the, for lack of any better, because again, these names, I call it the Crazy Sun story. Because again, it's part of this little this arc thing, and basically again, Leia's got a plan to try and hide the Rebel fleet, because, you know, there's a lot of ships orbiting around Arba that the Empire might pick up on if they aren't careful. And so the crazy plan, and I do reiterate, and I really must emphasize how crazy it is to hide the Rebel fleet inside Arbra's sun. Now, it's been a long time since my high school science So I don't know if any of this is based in actual cosmological stuff. But the idea is that apparently between the corona, which is basically that part which is basically like sort of what looks like the flame-like part, the emanations of light from the sun, and like the surface of the sun itself is this area of cooler air that is just barely survivable with the right equipment. And the idea is to conceal the rebel fleet in this area of the sun, because obviously the sun's radiation will hide the fleet easily from any Imperial snoopers. Now, of course, even if it's cooler than the surface or the corona, this area is still pretty intense, and so they have to set up this very special force field. Set up that's like maintained by these three big devices called Kurtzberg. It's spelled BHRG. But so this is the best pronunciation I got. Kurtzberg field generators, and basically this is going to produce a force field that's going to be strong enough to keep out the worst of the heat. And they're arranged in this big triangle, in which, it's going to basically create this bubble of protected space in which the fleet can basically stay inside of the sun and hide. And at first, things go well. And it looks like they may have hidden the fleet just in time because the Empire shows up in the area. So, of course, most of the rebels then, they start heading back to the base on Arbra, leaving behind, the usual, like, skeleton, like a skeleton crew of sorts, to just keep an eye on things. And R2 and 3PO are with Leia, but R2, spots something, and so he causes him and 3PO to miss the last shuttle leaving the fleet. And it turns out that right as the rest of the rebels are departing back towards Arbra, something goes wrong with the fleet. Someone or something has caused the Kurtzberg field generators to start failing. And several of the crew have been injured in a series of circuit breaker explosions. And basically, it is literally up to just the two droids to save themselves and the fleet before, the field fails and everything just not even melt at this range. They would evaporate. Because, of course, just to make things worse, it's not enough that the fields are failing, but it's failing in such a way that the fleet is currently on a trajectory towards the corona, which is apparently much hotter than this weird middle layer between it and the surface of the sun. Yep. Now, of course, these are the two luckiest droids in the galaxy. And they actually end up going outside in, 0G with just this weird heat retardant blanket protecting 3PO and R2 from the intense, from the increasingly rising heat. Because, the field is starting to fail, and the heat is slowly turning up. So time is not on their side here. And 3PO initially uses a jetpack, but of course, to add drama, it runs out of fuel. And so R2 resorts to using his fire extinguisher to basically propel them through 0G to the generators so that he can initiate the repairs that save the fleet just in the nick of time. While this is going on, though, because again, they're mostly, there's like a one-off story for each chapter, but there's also always some kind of underlying thing going on. So, like with the rebels trying to establish their new base on Arbra, it's sort of tied into Lando going to Cloud City. Here, while they're trying this weird, crazy sun plan for the Rebel fleet, Luke and Han are trying to acquire some TIE fighters for a special mission for the Rebellion. And their best source of getting their hands on some, derelict TIEs is this sleazy bastard named Ferret. So, just the name alone tells you that this guy is a slime ball. They go to this bazaar, the space bazaar. In fact, it's literally called that. And they meet Ferret, and he literally is like a stereotypical used car salesman. He has a comb over, and he wears a tacky suit. And of course, he tries to basically double-cross Lando and Luke just so that he can, keep the ties and the money for himself. So, standard operating procedure for this kind of criminal double-cross. Now, of course, Lando and Luke know this guy, his name is Ferret, and he's clearly a weasel. We don't trust you. And so basically, Lando has Chewie stay behind with Ferret, and apparently Ferret did not anticipate this. And Lando basically says, Chewie, if we don't return in about an hour, rip his head off. And so, Ferret is not exactly in the enviable situation that he was hoping to be in. Because apparently he really didn't think that his business interlocutors would have a backup plan to take account for his scummy behavior. So basically, the TIE fighters are all on this little abandoned world that's mostly used as a junkyard. And obviously, there's no idea of just how far away this is, but it really must be a testament to the Millennium Falcon's speed that they would be able to get there and back within an hour. That's their time frame. Of course, they nearly don't make it because, of course, Ferret completely neglected to mention to Luke and Lando that he's got this giant worm monster called Caesar, of all things, basically guarding the junkyard. And basically, he was hoping that, I'll take the money, send them on their way, my pet will kill them, and, I get to keep both the money and the ties. Nice. Luckily, there are some humans that have actually managed to survive on this junkyard planet. Oh, and this sort of reminds me of something I should have mentioned back when, in the Little Cloud City story. For whatever reason, the writers decided to have the Ugnaughts speak with what looks like a Scottish accent. Well, apparently this trend continues because the junkyard people have what looks like Russian accents, just the way that they spell the word bubbles spell certain things. It sounds like they're Russians. Let me just check something. Now, the thing is that when they came to the junkyard planet, Lando and Luke didn't... Well, actually, no, I misspoke. I really need to stop getting ahead of myself here. They didn't take the Falcon. They took the shuttle that Ferret gave them. And the shuttle has a sort of sonic emitter that's meant to pacify Caesar. So basically, Lando and Luke the plan was Luke and Lando would land, get off the ship, get away from, because, the ties would be far enough away from the ship, they would have to leave the range of the sonic emitter, and, Caesar would get them. That was the plan. But luckily, Luke manages to get to the emitter in time and activate it so that Caesar is pacified. And of course, he hands it over to the good junk people who helped them escape Caesar initially. So now, Caesar is under their control. Meanwhile, back at Bazaar, Ferret tries to pull a fast one on Chewie by locking him inside of a weird, I guess some kind of crystalline prison thing. But, you know, Chewie, he underestimated a Wookiee's strength, and Chewie just busts out and is about to tear him a new one, literally. When, you know, it's an hour later, Lando and Luke return safely with the stuff. And they basically inform Ferret of the bad news that, you know, you're not going to be able to use this anymore. Or, screw you, Ferret. A pretty short, simple adventure. But now, think here, the next 3 chapters, the last 3 that I'm going to cover tonight, this is where things are going to get interesting. If you've seen the tagline, that's pretty grim, and I meant it. I was not expecting, like, even in a post-Empire Strikes Back Star Wars story, I was not expecting the turn that this took. Even though I should have, frankly, because I'm sort of familiar with a few certain things that connect, albeit very obliquely, to this story, and in fact, specifically the character of Shira Bree. Now, if we recall, the point of the mission was to capture those 4 TIE fighters. And so basically the rebels use it initially to basically launch some attacks on Imperial bases. They use like Imperial codes to slip past security and then just go wild. Take out a few places, force the Imperial troops that garrison these places to surrender. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. All in a day's work for the heroes of the galaxy. See, pretty standard stuff. And of course, Luke leads these missions with Shira Bree as pretty much his right-hand woman at this point. And it's getting pretty obvious that the two of them are really starting to have a thing for each other. So, they return triumphantly. Leia's still not quite sure why she dislikes Luke being off with Bree so often, with Shira so often. Darn it, did I get her mixed up with Bria Theron from the Crispin Solo trilogy? Damn it. Ugh. So it turns out, so they're back at the base. Leia informs our heroes that the Empire has got this big armada going. Let me just check something here. What exactly is the mission of this armada? Well, basically, basically, it's kind of like the Empire's latest attempt to show its power and its might, basically. That's the point of this new, fancy, shiny new fleet. And its admiral, a fellow by the name of Geel, or Geel. They can never be certain with sci-fi names. So anyway, while the rebels are preparing for the big attack to sort of take out the armada, and they're going to use the captured TIE fighters for this, Shira asks for permission to basically briefly return to her home planet for a little while. Leia is initially very reluctant to do so because, if Shira's captured... No, actually, what is exactly Leia's reasoning? Yes. Oh, yes. Shira doesn't have the exact coordinates of the Arbra system. That's only given out to select personnel. And so basically, if she goes out, and Leia's not willing to give her the codes, just for basically a little trip back on down memory lane. There's a chance that Shira might not find her way back to rejoin the rebels. But of course, Luke is one of those people who knows the codes, and he figures, well, I've got nothing to do while we're preparing for this big attack on the Armada. I'll go with her, and I'll take some of my other pilots with me. And again, Leia's not too thrilled about this, but she can't really think of a good reason to say no. Oh. So anyway, our heroes arrive, and what's the name of the planet? Because this one's a pretty long one. Shalavane. Yes, there we go. Oh, this is Shira's homeworld, and it's mostly covered in ancient ruins. And basically, Shira just asks for a moment of privacy while she goes to this weird little shrine, and apparently cuts her finger and drips a little bit of her blood onto it. Of course, no one has any time to really question what this whole thing is about, because they're suddenly attacked by the local aliens. And they've got to basically beat, and like Luke and the other pilots have to like beat feet really fast. And apparently, even in the middle of a firefight, apparently Shira has time to basically give her backstory. She lived on this planet with blasted, yeah. She lived on this planet with her family, and at one point there was this big oh, what's this? Oh, a cloaked chest. She had this long. Her people had this long rivalry with the aliens, that also lived there. However, it seemed that about a generation ago they managed to establish some kind of peace, and apparently this was a very primitive world because they're just fighting with iron swords, not even energy weapons. But then one day the Empire showed up and basically blasted everything to smithereens. And pretty much killed everyone there. Killed most, enslaved the rest. That's standard procedure. Basically, Shira escaped. She vowed to destroy the Empire, and ever since, she has tried to come back to this world as often as she can to sort of renew her vow of vengeance. And I'm sorry, folks, but I've got to hit the can for a little while. I'll be back as soon as I can. Ooh, sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. Hope that wasn't too long. I'm going to see if there's a way to edit this in post. If not, like this gap in post. If not, I sincerely apologize. Now, where was I? Okay, yes, escape okay, so yeah. Luke, Shira, and the other pods managed to escape the aliens, and now, she's done her thing. There's actually a brief scare where it looks like some tunnel collapsed under Shira's feet and sort of centered down into the bowels of the planet. But all is well. Everybody's happy that she's alive, Luke especially, because, he's starting to have a thing for her. And they head back to prepare for the big attack on the Imperial Armada. We are now we've gotten to issue 61, and this is where it gets interesting. Oh, here, this scripter for this one is David Michelny. It's weird. Michelnie. Scripter and plot. Walter Simonson is also doing plot, but also breakdowns. Don't know what breakdowns is. Can anyone explain that in the chat or comments? Anyway, so now it's the big plan. Yeah. And but before we get to that, we sort of begin with a bit of a triumph. Because Shira, when at first she had fallen into what seemed to be fallen into that cave, she actually then sort of came in at the last minute to get to her starfighter and shoot the attacking aliens off of her friends' backs. And so, for this act of heroism, she gets a medal and a promotion to captain. And it's a great moment. Everybody's cheering. Because everybody really likes Shira Bree. She's very popular with the other rebels. All is growing great as they prepare to strike another mighty blow against the evil empire. It's like good times had by all. Of course, Luke immediately snags a chance to be with Shira, the first chance he gets. And this leaves Leia more than a little maudlin. And sort of and there's admittedly a pretty nice moment where she sort of goes off by herself briefly. And she sort of looks at like this holo recording of Han, and she starts musing aloud to herself how much she misses him, and she's so confused about why she seems to so dislike Luke being with Shira a lot. Because she reiterates to herself that I love Han. But so Luke, isn't it? I should be happy that he's got someone special in his life. But why do I always feel so uneasy because of this? And again, it's one of those sort of it is again a humanizing moment that Leia always puts up this strong front throughout both back when she was a senator representing Alderaan even as a teenager, and of course post the destruction of her world. They established this in the sort of John Carter homage arc. That she had to keep it together. That she has to present this idea that she is the resolute leader that the rebellion needs if it's to win. And I do appreciate that the comic does have these moments where, for just a brief moment, the mask cracks a little, the mask of control, and you sort of see someone who's still very much, who's still grieving, who is still, who still has, and even can somewhat still have the sort of, petty jealousies and other things that other people have. It's definitely something that this comic does really, really well, and I do appreciate it greatly for that. Let me just blow you up. So anyway, the rebels prepare for the big mission. We cut back briefly to Admiral Geel, or Geel. I can never get that straight. And apparently the Armada's current mission is to transport this giant, almost, well, it's not, it's kind of alive, but it's not sentient, this giant thing called a Teasel. Teezl. It's kind of this weird form of life form. It really is the sort of thing that it's a sort of life form that would fit in a lot better in like a Star Trek episode than a Star Wars story. I don't know why, but it's like Star Trek, you know, like both the original series and like pretty much all the TV series, they were really big on this sort of coming across these weird anomaly things. And the Teasel just strikes me as the kind of thing that you would expect the Enterprise to encounter. It would. I don't know how well it would fit in Star Wars, but I think it would fit far better in Star Trek. And basically, it's like a living communication booster, this Teasel thing. And so obviously the Armada is transporting it. I believe they don't mention Coruscant because they haven't established that that's the Imperial capital. But basically they're going to the capital. They're going to use this to basically boost Imperial communications, which can only give them a massive advantage over the rebellion. And of course, our hero's plan is to stop this from happening. Let me just first, I gotta find the members of Luke's crew, because they got the 4 TIE fighters, so it's 4 pilots. It's Luke, it's Shira. Sorry folks, give me a moment. What are the other 2 guys' names? Damn it all. Okay. It's caught up. Drat. Yes, here we go. Alf and Thorben. Those are the other 2 people that are going to be using the captured ties to basically sneak past, you know, the usual thing. They're going to sneak past Imperial security, get in the midst of the Armada, and basically they're going to cause enough havoc that the Empire is just going to constantly be shooting itself, having no clue exactly what's going on. Of course, it's going to... so at first, the plan goes off without a hitch. They managed to capture another TIE pilot that was out on patrol. They down his ship and basically have Chewie threaten to, again, pull his arms from his sockets if he doesn't tell them the codes they'll need to get past the pickets and, you know, the Imperial security. Because, you know, they got to give codes, recognition codes. Otherwise, you know, they'll be shot out of the sky before they can even... before they even have a chance. But you know, the plan goes off without a hitch initially. They get past the security and they just start shooting stuff. And unfortunately for the heroes, Admiral Geel is a fairly smart man. And though there is a lot of chaos and there's no way that the Empire can tell, you know, who's who or what's what, he basically he finds a way to sort of get around that. He orders them to do whatever it is they're doing to the Teasel to make it emit this powerful, almost like a form of blanket jamming. So it restricts the frequencies that anyone can use, which will basically make it easier for the Empire to track down the rebels by finding their frequency. Here, though, the situation gets really hairy for our heroes. Alf gets taken out. Darn it, I forgot the second guy's name. Let me check quick. Thorben. Thorben gets damaged, but, you know, he's able to pull out. What? But, you know, the rebels are still able to do quite a bit of damage to the Armada. It doesn't destroy it completely, but there are a lot of heavy losses, and they end up losing the Teasel, so at least the Empire can't use that to its advantage. But of course, because of the Teasel's blanket jamming up until that point, you know, this weird form of jamming, even the rebels can't tell who's who is friend and who is foe. And, you know, because Luke can't rely on his senses, he, of course, relies on the Force to get him through. And so, you know, he manages to make it back and strangely, everything seems subdued, even Thorbin, who was with him. And then, as he gets back and sort of has a meeting with Leia, the big bombshell drops. The big fat bombshell drops. One of the ties that Luke blasted was the one that Shira Bree was in. And so you can imagine, and that's where chapter 61 ends, by the by. Right. And I will admit, like, I did sort of know a few things already about this because Shira is connected to stuff that happens later in the expanded universe, particularly. But I will admit, I thought, oh, this is where this happens, where Luke seems to have killed Shira, his comrade in arms, and so it's kind of a problem here, because you know, and obviously, you know, even though obviously they're going to find a way for Luke to resolve this in a way that doesn't diminish his heroic reputation, because, you know, it's Luke Skywalker, you know, the hero of the story, paragon of all that is good. I mean, what kind of utterly incompetent and pea-brained boob would possibly write a storyline where Luke Skywalker deliberately does anything even questionably moral? I mean, glad no one's that stupid, except maybe a certain Hollywood hack. I mean, who said that? So anyway, Luke is obviously distraught. He has no idea how this happened, because again, he was relying on the Force throughout this whole thing, and with every tie he shot down, the Force told him this was an enemy. How could he possibly have mistaken Shira, the girl that he was kind of soft on, for a bad guy? And in fact, they even shared their first kiss before the mission. You know, the classic just in case one of us doesn't come back kind of thing. And of course, you know, Luke is devastated. But he also knows that, but Leia admits that she knows that there's no way Luke would have done this deliberately. Some kind of mistake was made. But at the same time, she can't really take his side in this, because in the Shira was very popular. And of course, you know, we saw her getting her medal and a promotion to captain. In the eyes of the rebellion, this does not make Luke look very good, and Leia can't be seen to take sides. And in fact, Luke realizes this, and he and Leia sort of stage this thing where it looks like he and Leia are sort of arguing, and Luke storms out, and it makes the onlookers think that, you know, maybe that Leia thinks Luke is also guilty of deliberately killing one of his own comrades in cold blood. And basically, Luke loses his commission as an officer in the rebellion. And basically, it's to give him the time that he needs to find some way to explain what happened, and if possible, clear his name. Of course, there's a bit of a moment where, even though some rebels are willing to give Luke the benefit of the doubt, there are others that aren't, and in fact, one of them basically tries to pick a fight with Luke in the mess hall, and accuses him of basically being like Vader, because, you know, they have established at this point that the Jedi are sort of all but forgotten in the post-Clone Wars era. And in fact, you know, they sort of later, post-prequels, they kind of have this thing where it's like by design, where the Empire or deliberately suppressed information. And so basically, as far as most folks in the galaxy are concerned, the Jedi are these weird sorcerers. And, Vader was a fallen Jedi. And so in the aftermath of Luke seemingly killing one of his own fellow pilots, a fellow rebel, several are starting to think that we can't trust this guy. And, Luke is like, even though this was by design, Luke knew that he had to make it seem that Leia didn't believe him. It still kind of hurts him a great deal that that so many people have suddenly turned on him in this way. But of course, he knows that his only chance is to find some kind of explanation or even exonerating evidence. And after some thought, he realizes that his best chance to find answers is to find out something about Shira. Why did the Force direct him to target her as if she was an enemy like all the other Imperials? And so he heads back to her homeworld. God damn it! What is the name? For whatever reason, so many of these. Maybe it's because there's just so many names and places. He says in this series alone. Darn it, where is it? Yes, Shalavane. That's the name of the planet. God damn it. Sorry, guys. He basically heads back there, and he decides to go. Maybe there are some answers at that weird little temple where Shira, dripped some of her blood onto the altar. That's his best chance at finding answers. Of course, without his officer's commission, and especially since he's under suspicion, in fact, Luke is not allowed near any of the ships. But of course, Lando is willing to help out, though indirectly. And so he basically has this thing where it's like, I can't, I gotta do the exact lines. Lando says, I've received specific instructions not to let you anywhere near the Falcon, and that's exactly what I plan to do just as soon as I pick up my spare cape at the base laundry. Shouldn't take more than... And Luke says, 15 minutes? Lando says, 15 it is. So, definitely Lando has by this point firmly cemented himself as a member of the core group of our bold, rebellious heroes. Of course, Chewbacca insists on coming along despite Luke's protests. Because, Luke figures that he has to do this himself. But, Chewie insists on coming with him. Because, Chewie is loyal to the bone. And in fact, it's established in some of the Expanded Universe books that during the rebellion, Chewie expanded his life debt to Han to include Luke and Leia. I don't think Lando was ever included, probably because, of the whole Lando sold Han out to Vader, even though he did make up for it later. But, whatever. It's not confirmed. But yeah, anyway. So, the Millennium Falcon arrives at... dang it, I just said it. At Shalavane. Damn it. I just said it and I already forgot it. Blast it. Anyway, they go to Shalavane. They go to looking for the weird temple. They get attacked by the local aliens again. Luke and Chewie are forced to hide in the tunnels that Shira briefly fell into. Damn it! I almost called her Bria, like Bria Theron from the Han Solo Crispin books. God damn it! Anyway, they find then this very old alien. And apparently, this guy is a bit more reasonable than his fellows, and he's willing to talk. And basically, Luke asks, if he can give him any answers. answers. And he asks about the humans that once lived on Shalavane. Yes, I actually remembered it, Shalavane. But the old man looks at him confused and is like, but there were never any humans on Shalavane, not until the Empire showed up. We lived here all by ourselves on this world, and we lived pretty peacefully. Obviously, but then, the Empire came, destroyed everything, and that was that. We live in the ruins of our old world. And it was ours alone. Obviously, this completely contradicts Shira's story. Right? And so Luke figures the only place where they might find answers is this weird little shrine, the Circle of Kavan, where Shira did that weird blood the thing with her blood. But of course, it turns out, even if the humans never found this place on Shalavane sacred, the locals do. And so the old man puts Skywalker to the test. It's, the classic, where is the stone hiding under the cup thing. That classic trick. But of course, Luke solves it easily because he has the Force. Though interestingly, the old alien thinks of this as just that the off-worlder has some very special gods on his side. A very interesting perspective, frankly. So, of course, he says, fine, you pass, we will take you to the shrine. And Luke just has enough time to ask we, when it turns out that all the old man's tribesmen were waiting there. And basically, because the old man decided he wanted to test this particular off-worlder. If Luke had failed, they would have just killed him on the spot. So, they arrive at the shrine. And in fact, Luke finds a strange bit of machinery, a transmitter. So, clearly, whatever Shira was doing at the shrine, she was trying to get in touch with somebody. Having no better idea of what to do, Luke basically has dripped some of his own blood onto the same spot as Shira. However, what happens is basically the shrine blows up suddenly, and there is a vision of Darth Vader. And in fact, we come to the end of chapter 62, so one away from the last one for this stream, and there's a footnote at the end, and it's signed David Walter, Tom, and Jim, and it says, I'm assuming Jim Shooter, because he was mostly the editor for this. And it says, we dare you not to buy the next issue. And the tagline is right under this final page of Vader just emerging, it seems, from the explosion. And declaring, I've come for you, Luke Skywalker. If that's a pretty sweet cliffhanger. And of course, that especially if you were a Star Wars fan in the 80s, you were going to get this issue. How could you not? It's great marketing. And so here we are, last one of the day, and sort of the end of this particular sort of weird, not quite arc of Marvel Star Wars. It turns out that Vader is not really there. This is a holoprojection. And he basically admits that, it's that what some might have been suspecting the whole time, that in fact Shira Bree was a double agent. She worked, in fact, specifically for Vader. Her mission was to eliminate Luke or capture him, at this point capture him, because Vader wants to turn him. Either capture him or, if possible, discredit Luke in the eyes of the rebellion. And by basically sacrificing herself so that Luke would kill him and seem to be killing one of his own, thus putting him in the doghouse with the rebellion. And Vader basically says, well, if you're seeing this, then this must have happened. You would have come here, Shira must have died, you must have come here to find answers as to why you blew up one of your own side. And and so basically this is it. The rebels must have turned against you. You no longer have a place among them, so son, join me and join the dark side. And that's pretty much it. Then the transmitter blows up again, but Luke knows immediately that the explosion was not strong enough to kill him outright. Because again, Vader wants him alive, and at this point, Vader's been a step ahead of Luke all the way. Clearly, this revelation about Shira's true loyalties is all a ploy to lure Luke into some kind of trap. And yet, if he wants to clear his name, he has no choice. He has to find proof that Bria was an Imperial agent. We then cut briefly to, Vader in his meditation sphere. Admiral Giel arrives, and basically Vader says, you were in charge of the Armada. It's suffered a lot of damage, and you lost that very, very valuable alien communication booster thing. The Teasel. Yes, Teasel, that's it. What do you have to say for yourself? And, to his credit, Giel, whatever. I'm going to stick with Giel. Giel basically says, I have no excuses. I did the best I could. And I accept... I don't believe that it's entirely my fault that this happened, but I accept responsibility. And, this actually impresses Vader enough that he decides to not kill him. Yeah. But he does demote the Admiral. So, but still, given what Vader is known to do with subordinates that fail, he got off lucky. So, Luke is still, he's got to find proof that will exonerate him. Proof that, Shira is an Imperial agent and that, he'll be welcomed back by the rebellion. But apparently it seems that the only place where he can find that proof is the Krake data vault. And it is a pretty wild looking thing, because apparently the Empire decided that this would be to make this thing not out of metal, but out of some weird pseudo-organic stuff. And it's shaped to look like a giant creepy bug. Now, of course, Luke figures Vader must know that I will come here to find the proof I need. So this is a trap. Now, the trick is I need to try and outthink Vader. I have to find a way in that he would not expect me to enter. He knows I'm coming, but he doesn't know exactly. But I have to think of something, of a way of how I will come that will throw him off. And I gotta quote this. I love the way that Luke says this. If Vader's as far ahead of us as he seems, he must have figured we'd come here, that we'd sneak in through an air shaft or something to try and reach the central storage computer. Sorry. So we've got to outthink him. We've got to find some other way to get Shira's file, a way so simple, so common, that it would be beneath the Dark Lord's dignity to even consider it. And, the panel cuts to a cook dumping out slops from the kitchen, and Luke says, "Chewie, old buddy, I think I've just found it." It's briefly, cut back to Arbra, where Leia is worried about Luke being able to clear his name or not. Then, back to the Krake data vault, blast it. So basically, Luke and Chewie sneak in through the kitchen, of all places. They find an Imperial officer there who apparently takes his meals in the kitchen rather than in the mess hall, because it's a bit too noisy for him on payday, specifically. Then Luke sneaks up behind him and basically tells him, "I've put poison in the food that you've just been eating. Now, either tell me how to access the files I want, or I won't give you the antidote." Now, he wants the officer to use the computer in the kitchen. It's mostly used to just store recipes for the cook, but Luke thinks that this officer has the kind of access codes needed to get at the main data network, even from this relatively obscure terminal. And it turns out that he is, and he does what Luke wants, and then he has Chewie knock him out. And he reveals to the horrified cook that the only thing this officer will die of is embarrassment. I just put some soap flakes into his food so that it would obviously make his stomach feeling queasy and unpleasant, but it's not going to kill him. And so Luke uploads the file, and it pretty much confirms everything that Vader said. Shira Elan Kola Bree, Major in the Imperial Special Forces, is in part of a training program for like adolescent indoctrination, full honors, full marks from Carida Academy. Well, no, Carida's not mentioned here. That's later. Excellent in close quarters combat, excels in all fields. Personally chosen by Vader himself for the current mission to eliminate and/or discredit Luke Skywalker. Oops, hang on, gotta find something. So basically, this is it. He's got all the proof. Unfortunately, the data thingy, it looks like a kind of like a brick, almost like a cassette. But whatever it is, it's basically destroyed by a stormtrooper laser because it seems that Luke couldn't quite outsmart Vader forever. He did have troopers at the expected entry points, but Luke was able to outfox Vader by going through the kitchen for a little while. Luke and Chewie barely managed to escape with their lives because of and a little bit of the old Jedi mind trick where Luke manipulates an Imperial officer apparently at an incredibly distant range. So pretty impressive for like a neophyte, because at this point he's only had some degree of training under Yoda, remedial training. But his strength in the Force grows, and he's able to trick this Imperial officer into lowering the shields around the date. What was the shields for exactly? Oh, right, because Luke, for some reason, he and Chewie get separated. He makes it to the Falcon ahead of him. By now, the data vault's on full alert. They have shields up. There's no way that Luke can get close enough to save Chewie. And so instead, he uses the Jedi mind trick to manipulate an Imperial officer into ordering the shields lowered, just long enough for Luke to swoop in and save the Wookiee. Of course, they narrowly evade Vader's Star Destroyer as he waits in orbit. But Luke's pretty down about it because he knows that he's failed. He hasn't, because the data file was destroyed. But of course, we can't have it end so doom and gloom. Chewie reveals that he has another copy of the data card cassette thing. And that was the reason why he was so far behind Luke, because he basically stayed to make another. The power of friendship, my friends. And so, Luke now has the evidence to exonerate himself. He will be able to prove that Bree was an Imperial agent. All is right with the galaxy. But before the chapter ends, this is issue 63, we have Vader inside a medical wing of the Executor, his flagship. And it reveals that Shira Bree is still alive, albeit in, a back-to-tank undergoing serious medical procedure, because although it seems that she survived, she suffered a lot of serious injuries. And so this ends the story for a while, but man, I do find it impressive, the way that they were ballsy enough to have Luke, even if it turned out, even if they found a way to exonerate him, provide proof that Shira was an Imperial agent. It is very ballsy of Marvel to have, the readers doubt Luke. Because, Luke doubts himself. He doubts the Force. Because, until he discovers that Shira was indeed an Imperial agent, He just can't believe that he killed a friend, a comrade in arms, someone that he even might have started to love. And he actually, doubts himself. He doubts the Force, or he doubts being a Jedi, this thing that he's dedicated himself to ever since he lost his aunt and uncle. Well, and of course they exonerate him in the end, it's a satisfying conclusion to that little arc. But it is still ballsy that they would do this early, even in a post Empire Strikes Back sort of thing. Because obviously, the Empire Strikes Back gave Star Wars, the license to go darker, to be more than just a loving tribute to lighthearted pulp adventures a la Flash Gordon. And this idea where, Luke seems to, kill one of his own, it's impressive that they thought to, even in those early days, that they thought they could pull off a story like that. And it is pretty good. I can easily imagine readers in those days being at the end of issue 61, where Luke sees that he's killed Shira, as what? How can this be? There's no way. Hey, it's good stuff. Very good stuff. And it's interesting because, that Shira, it turns out, is alive at the end of the arc. I'm not going to spoil anything because that's stuff I wish to cover in formal videos later, but through a bit of retconning after the expanded universe had its renaissance in the 90s, where they, with Thrawn and the Dark Empire, they're actually going to find ways to bring Shira Bree back beyond even the confines of this comic. And especially for those of you familiar with Star Wars post New Jedi Order, she becomes a very significant player in events to come. But I will not spoil that, and I trust some of you to at least try to resist the urge to spoil it in the comments. Though, I'm sure, then again, who knows? Maybe everybody who watches this channel is a hardcore Star Wars fan, that they would know all this stuff already. So maybe it's pointless to try for suspense. But anyway, that is it for today's stream. Thank you all for tuning in, and I am really looking forward to the next one, because this is so far the best overall arc. I still love the Third Law as the best individual story, but so far this is sort of the best bit of writing here. With Shira Bree and Luke questioning himself this way. It's very good stuff. And so, dear viewers, I hope you all have a lovely evening, and I look forward to continuing this soon. Have a lovely evening, and Merry Christmas.